Welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Some observers believe that we're coming to the end of the era of cheap oil and gas. That very soon, probably within a few years, we're going to reach our peak of extraction for oil. But meanwhile, our usage and our demand is growing, and we really don't have anything to fill up that gap. And it's, that cheap oil and gas has given us the luxuries of a world where we can zip around the world with goods and people. We're not looking at the same future that we thought we were. My guest today, we're going to talk about some of those possible scenarios and people's responses to this news and who knows what else. But first, Energy News with Rick. How about it, Rick?
Thanks, Janaea. I'll start with a little bit of odd weather news. New York is now digging out of the worst snowstorm they've had in many years, while here in Northern California, we've had over a week of sunshine and some high record temperatures. Climate change seems to be alive and well here in North America this winter. The recent G8 talks in Moscow focused on global cooperation amidst fears of increasing energy prices causing serious harm to worldwide economic growth. IMF Managing Director Rodrigo Rato said that supply issues are an increasing problem versus demand from countries like China. The world's largest solar PV project is planned near Las Vegas, Nevada. The project will be 18 megawatts with another 18 megawatts planned, enough to power 36,000 homes. Chevron has completed 2 hybrid power plants at 2 U.S. postal processing centers. These 2 mail processing centers will be powered by hydrogen fuel cells and solar power. This will reduce power costs by 46% and eliminate about 6,600 tons of carbon dioxide annually. The Chicago Tribune reports that farmers will see big reductions in incomes in 2006. The primary causes are increasing interest rates and rising energy costs. One farmer reports a 35% increase in fuel costs last year. Average farm income is expected to be $48,600 this year, down from $68,300 last year. Due to high competition at the retail level, it is unlikely that farmers can increase their prices. The article ended by saying that the U.S. now imports more food than it exports. In another article from Minnesota, farmers there say higher energy costs will make it much harder to make a profit. One farmer expects fertilizer costs to double this year. The same problem was echoed in an article from the Southeast Missourian. Farmers there expect fuel costs to be up 25% this year and irrigation fuel to be up 60%. Switching to international news, in a recent CNN USA Today Gallup poll, Americans expressed grave concerns about the situation in Iran. The majority thought that if Iran had nuclear arms, they would use them against the U.S. or Israel. They also thought that President Bush would tend to move too quickly to the use of military force, but not quickly enough to use other methods to deter Iran from making nuclear weapons. In 5 news articles that have been published in recent days, they all express a common thread that the economic impacts of a military operation against Iran would be catastrophic. In one article on the evworld.com website, they thought that crude oil prices could escalate as high as $300 a barrel and that gasoline prices here could be as high as $10 a gallon in the aftermath of a military attack on the nuclear facilities and military bases in Iran. The article also suggests that Iran would likely react by attacking oil terminals and facilities in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. In another article from the UK, the News Telegraph reports that they think that as many as 10,000 people would be killed in that operation. In other peak oil news, Dr. Kenneth Deffies, who is a renowned expert and author on peak oil, said last year that he thought that peak oil production would peak on Thanksgiving Day. He has now said on his website that production actually peaked on December 16, 2005, according to data he has analyzed. On that day, the world had consumed more than 1 trillion barrels of oil, considered to be half of the known reserves in the world. That's all the news that we have time for tonight. So now back to Janaea and her guest.
Thanks, Rick. Well, my guest today is Mary Nelson, who lives here in Penn Valley and has been an activist for decades. And part of why I wanted you to join us, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're here.
So pleasant to be here.
You've been keeping an eye on the big picture for a long time. And when we take news like we just got from Rick about the farmers not sure they can turn a profit, I mean, that's a huge blow to feeding our people. Rumors of war in Iran, that if it could bring the gas prices up like this, we're talking about a very possible precipitous changes. But I want to go back, I mean, that's like, things feel like they're heating up to me. They feel like they're really heating up. But you've got a longer view. You've been watching this. What have you, take us back and bring us into what you're looking at and seeing now.
Well, I do have a longer view, a long view, because my family was involved in social justice issues since I was a very small child. My father belonged to an organization that was advocating that we were going to have to change our economic system radically if we were going to move into the future in the North American continent in a comfortable, sustainable way that served all the people of the North American continent. So looking at the big picture was what I was raised with. And I guess you either reject that or you go with it, if that's what you learn when you're very young. So
and you've gone with it.
I've gone with it. It just seemed the thing to do, to be aware of what's going on in the world, in your environment, what's happening. And it was more than an intellectual decision. It was like, it was part of us to be doing that, to be looking.
So when we had the oil embargo in the 70s, I mean, I'm sure, or in the 60s even, your family's background was about social justice and the civil rights movement and those sorts of things, perhaps. But when we got the oil embargo and then the prices raised and so on, I know a lot of people at that point figured, people now are saying, look, we don't yet have oil prices that are as high as we had in the early 80s. Right. Is this another crying wolf? I mean, in the 80s, they went in the North Sea and we got a whole lot more oil. Surely, you know, the Alberta tar sands are going to save us or something.
Right. Right.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, from my perspective, the oil embargo in the 70s was, maybe it was an indication of things to come, but it was pretty much a manipulated thing, that it probably wasn't due to the fact that we're going into oil depletion. It probably wasn't, to me, a peak oil thing. It was more of a price and production and who's got the most reserves and how they're manipulating and playing with that. But it did wake a lot of people up to the realization that resources are indeed finite. And something we've ignored, our culture has been ignoring or trying to ignore for the 100 years, it seems to me.
Which is scary. I mean, when you hear news of this, I mean, even if this didn't come true this year, even if we didn't see, you know, $100 a barrel, still we're going to be facing that this resource isn't going to be here forever.
Right, and we've been acting as if it were.
How do you think it's going to first, well, we may be already seeing first signs of it, so we may have clues. How do you think, how might the scenarios play? What kind of clues are people going to be noticing in their lives, let's say?
Well, people are going to, of course, the price of gasoline, of course, is going to be one of the major things that people really take notice of and that affect them. They're talking about it already. I have friends that haven't dealt with the peak oil situation at all who have decided to cut back on the size of the car that they have and how much driving they do. They got rid of one car in a family of 3 cars and so on. There's an awareness there. They're comfortable with it. They're often not really real concerned for the future. But yes, gasoline prices will be one of the things that it's going to be talked about. It's going to be buzzed about.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's going to
Yeah.
be a lot of scuttlebutt around that. What do you think it means and all that? But I think, you know, the prices that are going to go up, the costs of things that are going to go up because of the costs of oil in other products, the indirect, like with the food, with the transportation, everything that we do that moves, or that we wear, or that we eat, everything our culture does is founded on this fossil fuel, which is going to be a diminishing resource.
So we're going to see prices everywhere increasing, just, I mean, for everything everywhere, which means that either families will have to cut back or they'll have to go into their savings. But we're looking at a situation in our world, our country right now, in which the savings rate is negative. People are depending on credit or borrowing against their homes or whatever. So we don't really have a buffer like I think we did in the early 80s in the embargoes.
You know,
what are people going to
to
do?
me that's part of what makes me feel like this is such a brewing perfect storm, because there are so many areas of our lives where this is coming together. People are mortgaged to the hilt. They maxed out their credit cards before they got mortgaged to the hilt. Been using their houses as ATMs, like we're saying.
Great image.
And then, you know, the commercial world and the political world is playing along with this, in that the regulations on use of credit cards, or interest on credit cards, or when your payments due on credit cards, all those regulations have been removed, so people are in trouble there in a way that they weren't before. It's moving along with it. It's almost as if you know, the whole culture is somehow, and maybe there's something that's the way it works. Maybe the whole culture moves forward into this what could be a catastrophe if we don't become aware of what's happening.
Just, you know, when you talk about moving all the forces, I mean, just made me realize that the bankruptcy laws have been changed, so it's going to be harder for people to do that. So it feels like a lot of the safety nets are being torn away.
Right. We hear, you know, every day in the paper it talks about Medicare being cut back. You know, there's issues about Social Security. There's issues, this prescription drug problem, this new plan that has left many people high and dry. Everything is moving towards, those things to me are part of the response of the whole culture to the conscious or unconscious realization of peak oil.
So is that what? Is that a kind of denial? A kind of, I mean, I just want to keep living happily on my credit cards, and I mean,
it's probably everything.
It's
probably everything.
Like,
I think for the individual person, it's very much a personality kind of thing, that they're probably dealing with this the way they in general have dealt with their life and are dealing with their life. They're, you know, the person that, well, something will come along, everything will be okay. I have friends who, very, very knowledgeable, highly educated, successful people who, well, some kind of a car will come along. Somebody will invent a car that will come along, and everyone in the world will be able to have one and keep on driving.
So we can sort of continue our life the way we've known it.
Yeah, it's a kind of a psychological stance that people take. Other people do get concerned and start thinking about, gee, do I need to do something about my finances? What can I do about my finances in general to prepare me for this? I think that people in our culture that are in the corporate world, in the political world, like everybody else, they deal with it, how it's going to affect them today and tomorrow and the next day.
Well, our corporate world...
Who's looking at the big picture?
Our corporate world looks to the next quarter, the returns, so we're not looking terribly far ahead overall, and the people in the political world to the next election. And I'm sure that a lot of the political folks are just saying, not on my watch, you know, I don't, you know, it'll happen, you know, later. I mean, that's part, when I was first paying attention to peak oil, I was sure that this was going to happen, you know, 30 years or 40 years down the road, not now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that a lot of people are just thinking, well, or else are waiting for somebody to come up with a miracle, whatever.
Or a lot of people do
solution.
believe that somebody's in charge, and that somebody or that group of somebodies is taking care of us. I don't know if they really believe it, but they need to believe it, and they're not used to doing anything about taking that responsibility for themselves. Maybe all of us lack some of that sense of responsibility. I mean, we have been just kind of going along.
Well, when I was first reading about peak oil, my first thought was, surely the corporate world, who utterly depend on, you know, cheap fossil fuels, are not going to watch their industries tank.
Yeah. As soon as they find out about it, they're going to do something, right?
That they must have something in the works, you know, in the wings that they're developing. But when Richard Heinberg came here in November, and I asked him that question, he said he's visited quite a few boardrooms, and they're about as clueless as we are on what to do about this.
That's right, and I remember him giving some feeling about how and why they can do that and do that, and he spoke about their short-term vision, that they're required. I don't think he actually mentioned that they're required by law, but they really are required by law. When a corporation is created, it is required by law now that it serve this quarter's concerns, needs, investments of their shareholders. How would you do it otherwise? And so they really, when they walk into their office in the morning, they don't have to deal with anything but that.
So, of course, they're basing their assumptions on a continuation of what we have now. I mean, we might have higher gas prices, but we'll just build that in or into the cost of things.
So that's a mindset too. We each carry our mindset with us, and that's what this is all about. We're trying to help each other learn, open up to a larger picture, think about what we can do.
So, if you were able to do a magic wand, right? We took our shoes off, actually. We're here in our socks. So if we wanted to knock their socks off with sort of a mindset of what kind of ideas do you have for a mindset that could be a more healthy mindset for how to respond to this information?
I think that each of us individually need to respond right now, right here, where we are. There's a larger picture beyond that we can't necessarily influence right now. Maybe the time will come that we will. In other words, like Heinberg says, you know, there may need to be a rationing of resources. Well, will we have a political voice when in deciding how those resources get rationed? We don't have time to go into that today, do we? But each of us can look around very locally, and you know, I think about things like we're often told, look at how you're using energy, and look how you can use less. And after all, our president has now told us we should start looking at how we should use less. Right?
Yes, we're all addicted to this stuff.
Right. And I was thinking about that today. I was thinking that, you know, I haven't done an awful lot of things to use less energy, even though I've known about this for a long, long time. But even going through the process of thinking about it, I really don't need to be doing this, or I really could combine these two things or these two trips on a very local, personal level. Who you live with and who are your neighbors, really, really important to start talking to your neighbors, forming neighborhoods, forming communities, because when something really untoward and what appears to be catastrophic happens, that's who's going to be in our face. It's going to be our neighbors. and it's very important to build community with your neighbors. And we haven't been a culture that is particularly interested in doing that.
Well, I think that our automobiles have been one of those wonderful, both a blessing and a curse. And part of the blessing is, we can leave our families and move across and live across the nation, and it sort of has helped promote our sort of hyper individualism. We have our own little separate space, and we're mobile, and we've lost that fabric of community. But when the physical things change, knowing who's down the road or next door,
and having made connection, having a relationship, having a working relationship,
so that you can help each other at those times. So you can
help each other, and even we talk about what we can do. Learning about this, to me, is one of the most important things we can do. I have a really strong belief that you keep your cool when you understand what's happening. And that it's even easier to keep your cool when the inevitable happens, no matter how bad it is, if you recognize that it was inevitable. You can prepare for it in some way, even if that's just psychologically. Even if that's just preparing with your family, with the people you see every day, with your neighbors, that something's getting ready to happen, that there are signs all over that something is getting ready to happen, and that understanding helps you be able to help others.
So what I hear from you actually also is that from understanding what may play out here, what possibilities like shortages or blackouts or huge prices, or you may lose your job because industries are going down if we've got a real recession happening. Thinking about those things can at least even bring a kind of calm, because you're not going to get hit sideways by things.
I feel really strongly about that, and even when I'm not a person who's like real assertive in your face about what's happening. I kind of tend to try to help bring forth the knowledge. I'm a teacher, and so that's kind of my style. But by doing that, you can be in a position to help others stay calm. And that may be the most important thing for a lot of us. If 3 people in the neighborhood have just lost their job just when somebody got sick, and that farmer down the road goes out of business because he can't get the loans. I mean, all these little things that have been affecting individuals throughout our whole culture as we move along through these decades, kind of coming together. And when they come together all at once for one individual or one community, somebody is going to have to understand what's happening in order to help the others just get through the first part. We need to get through the first part.
So what I hear is forming those networks of mutual aid, even if all it is I have some extra food, or let's share a ride together while we still have some gas at this time until the rationing fits through, whatever.
Yeah.
Or even just to talk about this possibility.
Yeah.
Now, you've talked with folks, and we've just got a couple minutes here. I want to make sure that any last thing that's percolating gets to come out. I'm wondering the kinds of responses you're getting with this news, or how your neighbors might respond, do you think?
In the many ways that I've already said, somebody's going to fix it. Don't worry about it. It's always been like this. Oh yeah, it's going to get worse, and maybe we won't be able to stay here. But I have had also lots of people, even in my community, which is a pretty upscale community there in Penn Valley, where people come forth and want more information. This is one of the things I'm doing in a very personal way. Is I help put out a little newsletter for for my community. And every couple months I advertise that I'm going to have a salon showing of End of Suburbia. And each time I put a blurb about something that's happening right now that may have called your attention to the fact that oil is peaking and what that might mean for a community such as ours. And I'm playing kind of a game with myself. Sooner or later, people will start showing up. And that's the kind of thing. And because I'm putting it out there in their attention, see?
You're doing sleuth work here. You're just going
putting it
under
out
the
there.
radar.
Just kind of lay it out there. And when the time comes when some pressure is felt or they read something that really catches their eye, like the thing from the G8, you know, that people will be reading, they'll ring a bell and, oh, yeah, I heard something about that. And there's something I can find out about that. And when people start to want to find out about it, maybe we're halfway there. If we have a role to play, if we have a place to go, understanding is going to be the halfway there.
That's a wonderful, wonderful reminder. Yeah, well, that's our hope here, is that enough people wake up and begin to do things and start to sort of grease the skids and help our farmers stay afloat and figure out how to do carpools and so on, that we will at least have those beginnings. But I love your notion of you're dropping seeds. You're dropping seeds, aren't
like
you?
the apple tree.
Like an apple tree. Any last thoughts?
Just keep up the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
I'll keep up the work I'm doing. We're all going to work together here.
Thank you.
We have to. We just move into the future. What else would we do? What else would we do?
Well, otherwise we could put the bag over our heads and pretend it wasn't happening, but I'm sure that that wouldn't last very long, particularly for you.
And for you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is Janaea Donaldson. You've been enjoying Peak Moment with my guest, Mary Nelson. Join us next week for the next episode.